Hi, I'm very to our sneak preview of Discovering Your Blind Spots course. This is actually an informative talk that will have some revealing information for you, but it's also kind of a preview for my upcoming summer course. What I decided doing is that I usually do like the first lesson, which is kind of an overview of everything that we need to do in the course, and I kind of need to do that for the class anyway, and then I kind of make that available. It's kind of a free promo, and it gives it people, there's a lot of knowledge in it for those of you who saw my Nakshatra preview. There's a lot of really deep knowledge in it. It was the first lesson of the course, but it was really kind of important. So we're going to do that today. We're only going to spend about an hour, probably not more than an hour and 5 minutes, and we're going to have fun, and hopefully you'll learn something. Let's start with some, here's my contact information. My website, appliedvedicastrology.com. It's applied because I'm kind of very practical. I've got Virgo rising in the Navamsha chart, and I've got Jupiter and Taurus in the Navamsha chart. So it gives me kind of an earthy, practical orientation toward knowledge. I like knowledge to be practical and not just kind of airy-fairy. So I'm very kind of real about having about remedies and what we can do to help people. Most of you know me from Facebook, either Very Rosen, Astro Yoga, Spiritual Astrology, and I do respond to text on Facebook, and my office number also for you. Okay, so let's start with some chanting. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha. Vakratunda Mahakaya, Suryakoti Samabraha, Nirvigyam Kurame Deva, Sarvakareshi Sarvada. Jnanamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Mantramulam Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa. Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavahai, Tejasvina Vatitamastu, Mahavidvishai Om Shanti Shanti. Om Aditaye Samaye Mangale Buddhaye Cha Guru Shukra Shani Vischa Rahuve Ketave Namaha. Honoring the great teachers of wisdom, Lord Krishna, Saraswati, goddess of wisdom, Vedavyasa, the first cognizer and writer of the Vedas, the holy tradition of masters, which I'm part of, and back to Brahmananda Saraswati. Honoring my Jyotish teachers, the people who've had the most influence on me, Sanjay Roth, Camilla Sutton, and Bill Levacy. So while we're waiting for a few people to come, I wanted to do a couple shameless plugs. First of all, I have a new book coming next week. It's called Saturn and the Purple Dragon, Spiritual, Psychological, and Emotional Wisdom to Guide You Through the Realms of Fear and Illusion. So it'll be on Amazon as an ebook, and it'll also be available on my website. And Jamie, who's my editor, is with us today. Jamie, do you want to say something about the new book?
Sure. Well, we're really excited that it's going to be coming out next week, and it's about just some of the transformations that we all go through in life. And Barry has put together a lot of great commentary and articles about just the normal events that we go through that build our character. So just kind of about our sufferings and just the normal events. We all are looking for that magic bullet. So just some of the articles in there just kind of touch on some of those points about the spiritual aspects. So the focus is how Saturn helps us with that, and how we dive deep into those depths. And also we'll be taking a look at the focus of the houses. So we go into the 4th house, the 6th, the 8th, and the 12th, which are often some challenging points there. And then there's some other articles in there that's got some really good insights that Barry has had as he dives in a lot deeper into, you know, the spiritual and emotional and psychological aspects of astrology. So it's just a really great compilation work that we've been working on and trying to put together for everyone. So hopefully we'll get that pushed out next week, and we're just really excited to, you know, have that come to fruition.
Right. And then Vedic Astrological Almanac, which is like over 300 pages, which is kind of a guide to the whole year, and it's also available. Many of you I know have that already. So let's talk a little bit about this class that's coming up. We will have a wonderful talk in a second. I just, you know, people are always coming late a little bit. So understanding your hidden flaws and blind spots, diagnosing remedies for hidden patterns in your personality. So one of the things that I think is most useful is, see, I feel that Vedic astrology is like reading strands of DNA, and that astrology should help us see our patterns and our hidden patterns. I mean, if somebody, if you have a client and he walks in with a blue shirt, and you tell me he has a blue shirt, you know, what are you really helping him? I mean, that's kind of like somebody walks in with Aries, right? You know, they're Aries rising each other, and they're competitive and ambitious and, you know, aggressive, and of course they know that. But we want to. We all have kind of these kind of blind spots in our life. We'll be talking about that in a minute. And this course is really about all the different. We have 13 lessons on different ways that we can see the illusion in our life and in our own blind spots. And it comes up in so many different ways. We'll talk about that today. We'll spend a whole couple of weeks on the moon chart and the way the mind, the moon is obviously the basis for our mental disturbances and our illusions, and so we have to see how that's impacted. We'll talk about how blind spots are created from planetary periods. We'll be talking about the different houses and how they can kind of create blind spots. You know, the 12th house is at sunrise, and so we can't, you know, it blinds us. We can't see the issues. The 7th house is at sunset, and we can't really see those issues very well either. In fact, and that's why relationships are such a problem. And the 8th house gives all kinds of surprises out of left field because it's past karma, and we're kind of blind to them, but they are in the chart, and you can diagnose them. Spend a lot of time, at least 2 lessons on Rahu and Ketu. I mean, obviously Rahu and Ketu. Rahu is particularly about illusion, and so it blinds us with ambition, and Ketu kind of blinds us with kind of self-deprecation sometimes. We want to go deeper with that material. We'll spend a little bit of time on the Upagrahas, particularly Gulika and Mandi. You know, they kind of create these kind of hidden problems, sometimes paranoia. We'll look at Vodika, which is, I just published an article on that on my blog. You can look at that. It's the way that certain rising signs give us deeper kind of karmic challenges that are just kind of innate with in our rising sign. We just tend to inherit these problems. We look at Dagda Rashi a little bit. Dagda Rashi comes from the Panchanga, and each lunar day has a certain has certain signs that are blocked out, and you kind of can think of it like if when the sun or the moon conjunct, it's like 12 o'clock and each day, each tithi, you know, we move towards the full moon at 6 o'clock, and then so there's certain shadows that are cast as the clock moves to 6 o'clock and back to 12 o'clock. And on certain days, there's certain signs that are blocked out, and they create kind of psychological shadows that we can't see, and so we're kind of blind to them. So it's kind of a really fascinating topic. Got a little bit about Argala, which is something that is quite fascinating, and there's kind of these archetypes of the way there are blocks in our chart. And it's a kind of a difficult topic. I've made it simple. And we're going to do something new that I've never taught before. Parashari talks about the Lajita Avastyas, and he uses words like proud, starved, thirsty, delighted, and agitated. And we need to get those into modern psychological translations. They tell us a lot about our personality and our blocks. And then one of the things that I'm kind of interested in is multidimensionality of Vedic astrology, and that's kind of the way that our problems start on our mental and emotional level before they move into the physical and the material realm. And I think if we can catch them early, then we don't have to have the kind of the physical crisis that sometimes manifests with an accident or an acute illness, because the problems manifest first on an emotional, psychological realm. I mean, I'll share a story from you. I had a friend who had Ketu in the fourth house. And if those of you know a lot of Vedic astrology, Ketu in the fourth house creates hidden problems with cars and automobiles. It's probably a real difficult place for Ketu to be. And he had this car, and he kept taking it to mechanics, and for a year and a half, nobody could solve the problem. And then my dogs are excited. And then finally, he found a mechanic that kind of found this hidden valve problem in his car, and he'd been taking to mechanics for a long time, and nobody could diagnose this problem, and it's kind of a typical K2 problem. At the same time, he was having problems with his arteries, and he had like this hidden heart problem. And then K2 in the fourth house is kind of on an emotional level, is connected to mom's not there. There's not emotional. There's an emotional lack of happiness. And when he started looking at the issues around his mom and his lack of happiness, he finally found a solution to the car problems and the heart problems in his physical heart. So we are this kind of multi-dimensional creature. So we'll have a lesson on that. It's kind of a fascinating topic. And we'll also have a lesson on practical remedies, because basically those of you know, I've been sponsoring these remedy classes now, because you can't really tell people they have a problem and you can't without offering a remedy. So we have to move into something practical. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do with. That's kind of a quick overview of the class, and I'm going to move to our talk today, so that you actually learn something new. Okay, so originally I was calling this class kind of Vedic psychology, and it is, but then I realized that my real passion is connected to kind of revealing these kind of hidden patterns that people can't see. So this lesson is kind of the ocean in a drop. It's, we'll briefly talk about the 13 lessons in the class, and we may only get to spend 5 minutes on some of the topics, and each class may be 1 to 4 hours. So our core, is, all of us are interested in astrology because, it can answer really deep questions. Why am I here? Why am I suffering? How can I get out of suffering? How can I live a better life? And it always reminds me of, to me, our life and our incarnations and our patterns that keep recurring. It's kind of like my favorite movie, Groundhog Day, with Bill Murray. I'm sure many of you have seen that movie where this weatherman gets stuck in this blizzard in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, and he keeps reliving the same day until he gets it right. And initially he can't get out of the nightmare, and so he drives off cliffs and he goes to the diner and eats piles of food, and obviously that doesn't solve the problem. Eventually he learns by the end of the movie to be a humanitarian person and help people, and everybody loves him, and he finally wakes up and gets out of the nightmare. But I think our evolution is like that. We want to grow beyond our blind spots, like Bill Murray, and kind of realize, how can I lead a better life? How can I not make the same mistakes? And I think that's what Vedic astrology should reveal. This idea came out of a talk I gave at the American College of Vedic Astrology, and when I was talking about 12th house patterns and blind spots. And so I want to start there. And first of all, we have to remember that the planets impact our thoughts and emotions most first. And so we have to kind of learn to catch our thoughts and emotions. And if we can, and we're not gripped by them and we're not blinded by what's going on, then we have a chance of changing our life. And to me, most people into astrology are into meditation and yoga and spiritual practice, and we need spiritual practice to have the awareness to kind of catch our thoughts and emotions. I think that's kind of the key. The more we do spiritual practice, the more we can be aware of who we are and what we're doing and how we can do it better. You know, astrology was never intended to strike fear into our hearts and make us feel very stuck. And I'm sorry if my columns ever do that. You know, really, Jyotish is light, and it shed light on and to allow us to be free of our thoughts and emotions that are gripping us. And we need to kind of develop that awareness to move beyond it. So we want to understand how our karma is kind of gripping our emotional and mental world so that we can be free of it. And sometimes it's kind of just a gyan technique. What usually happens is that when we don't know what's going on, we get caught up in self-blame and self-shame, and we beat ourselves up, and that doesn't go anywhere. I mean, we want to become aware of the puppet master, and the planets are kind of like the puppet master. They kind of pull the strings of our emotions and our thoughts, and they bind us to the world, and we kind of blame ourselves. And so Jyotish should take us away from self-blame and self-shame. Astrology should be kind of a gyan technique. If you know, gyan is the word knowledge, and knowledge gives us the experience to move beyond our imperfections. And so I like to think that astrology, you know, certainly that I do, is kind of creating a Zen moment, a Zen observation that enlightens us to see that we're not our thoughts, our emotion, our ego, and that frees us from bondage. And basically, we just always have a lot of shadows, and the shadows are Maya. And so our thoughts, you know, our emotions, you know, it's all just kind of mental noise. Most of it isn't real. And Eckhart Tolle always reminds us that, you know, we're not our mind, we're not our thoughts, we're not our emotions, and we aren't, and we have to kind of get free of those kind of influences. And the planets are they're kind of casting shadows on us so that we can become free, and that's kind of the purpose of astrology. My friend Juliana Swanson, a good mentor for me, she wrote this. She said, you know, we shouldn't be a victim of the stars. Juliana wrote that when we wake up, we realize we are multidimensional, and at any given time, there are many possibilities. There are unlimited possibilities in the fact that every astrological combination is good for something and bad for something, and has a higher versus a lower expression depending on the consciousness of the person. So, I mean, that's really kind of telling, because, you know, you read sometimes Western astrological columns and they, you know, frighten you into thinking the world's going to end. And then, you know, you may see another person writing something and they see, you know, there's a positive way to look at every event in our life, even these difficult things that we just had with Mars Saturn, or we're going to have Mars K2 this summer. There's always kind of a positive energy in everything that's happening. We have to kind of learn to understand it. And we have to kind of own our own divinity. My spiritual teacher was fond of saying that that we're actually master of the planets and not victims of it. And to do that, I mean, that's what enlightenment is. We just see that we're kind of master, and we can actually command the planets. In fact, Linda Johnson in her book, you know, has one of her remedies is to kind of talk about, well, create a new chart if you don't like the one that you have. You can create it mentally. I did this once, and it actually does work. You just start kind of mentally realizing, well, I have a debilitated moon. Well, now I have an exalted moon, and I can, you know, you can actually shift the planets with your consciousness. One of the things that I learned very young when I was going to Saudi Sod in my 30s, and Saturn was a bear, I kind of had this sense that I could command Saturn to go. I said, Saturn, you can go now. I don't need the fear. I don't need the anxiety. I don't need the doubt. And I felt this huge release that Saturn could leave. And so we have to remember, if we meditate enough and we have a strong enough spiritual background, we don't have to be gripped by the planets. We can just release the energy and just tell Saturn or Mars or Rahu to go. I mean, we don't have to be a victim of the planets, but we usually are. One of my great spiritual teachers was fond of saying mud is endless. And I don't know if it's useful for us to spend a lot of time just kind of beating ourselves and analyzing all the mud. He was very kind of fond of saying, if you want to, if you have a pond, and the second you step in the mud, you kind of stir up the mud. And once you stir up the mud, it doesn't settle down very easily. But sometimes if you kind of quietly tiptoe in, you can see the bottom of a pond. In a sense, I think spiritual practices like that, we can sometimes transcend in meditation and get beyond the mud. But, you know, if we spend 15 years in psychotherapy, and I love psychology, you know, I think we stir up the mud a lot, and I'm not sure it settles down that easily. So we have to find a balance, and I think spiritual practice is essential to being successful with astrology. So the key with moving beyond Maya and illusion is obviously self-awareness. We have to meditate. We need Jyotish to shine the light on Maya. And you know, a lot of people have been doing a lot of work on remedies. You know, yagas and pujas and mantras are powerful, but you know what they do most is they clear your illusion. So if you're in a Rahu period, it's creating all kinds of problems and you just can't see clearly. So you get a Durga mantra or Durga puja or Durga yaga, you know, suddenly you'll be able to see what's going on. And so that's one of the values of remedies, is that they should clear the mind. But when people want magic bullets, they want somebody to take away all their problems. But you know, we have to do the work. It's kind of like Bill Murray and Groundhog Day. You have to do the work. You can't. You have to change your pattern so you don't repeat the same mistakes. That means you have free will every moment to create something new. So, so the idea of this course came out of my talk at ACWA. I'll be speaking there again in November. And the key is this self-awareness. So, you know, at sunset when we're driving west into the setting sun, we're blinded by the rays and we just can't see, and that's, we're clearly kind of blinded. And actually, the seventh house is connected to sunset, and so that's why it's thought that no planets do well in the seventh house, because we really can't see what's going on. I know this happened to me. I mean, it happens to everybody when you're driving and going home from work and you're going west. You just can't see and you're blinded, and it's a real problem. And sometimes when planets are in the seventh house or in the 12th house, it's kind of like that. The mind kind of plays tricks on us, and sometimes we're gripped by things that aren't true at all. I mean, I have a friend now who was so sure that his wife was having an affair that he pretty much, you know, beat her up and destroyed his marriage. And it wasn't true. He was just kind of gripped by old thoughts, maybe in a past life that had happened. But this lady was extremely pure. It was not happening, and he just was so gripped by these thoughts and these impressions that he was totally blind to what was happening. And that's it, kind of Rahu Ketu in the first seventh axis, and that's the type of thing that can happen sometimes. You're just kind of blinded by what's true and what's not there. You know, 12th house is also kind of like that, because at sunrise we've got, 12th house is really about sunrise, and the stars are most obscure. There's thick misty exhalations, and the moisture of the earth is there. It's kind of like you can't see the planets at sunrise. And so the 12th house, you have planets in the 12th house, they're also kind of blind spots. They're you know, sometimes we have this perverted logic with planets in the 12th house. They're hidden enemies. 12th house is a place of hidden enemies. And there's a lot of danger in the 12th house because we can't see what's going on. We can't perceive the truth. There's deep subconscious patterns, and it may be our whole life we're kind of blind to our 12th house patterns. And I've kind of seen that in my own life. I have Saturn in the 12th house. The 12th house is kind of a place of self-undoing. And when you approach the veiled gates of this house, you know, come armed with healthy suspicion of your own blind spots, because it's, you know, it's a very kind of vulnerable place. The shadows are there, and we can't really see the truth. There are good placements in the 12th house. If there's dignity in the 12th house, like the planets in its own sign are exalted, and there's no malefic influence, planets in the 12th house can be fine. Actually, they may point us towards spiritual growth, towards moksha, towards meditation. But when there's not dignity for planets in the 12th house, and they're afflicted by malefics, which is often the case, or they're malefic associations, you get these kind of problems. So, like Sun in the 12th house, the ego is blinded by power and not be able to see, and it becomes a compensation for low self-esteem and lack of confidence. You know, you often see people with Sun in the 12th house when it's afflicted that they're so hungry for power because inside they lack power. 12th house, Sun in the 12th house is a really difficult placement because people aren't seen, and so they kind of go overboard to be seen, and they kind of like take over, and then they don't even see what's going on, and deep down they have low self-esteem and low lack of confidence. Root in the 12th house, can create martyrdom and self-sacrifice as a compensation for feeling alone. People who get caught up in being the martyr mom and kind of taking care of everybody else but themselves, and they think that will be a way of like dealing with their own lack of self-esteem in this area. And what happens usually is the kids go away and they hate their mom anyway, and they're left alone, and then they're just in a kind of difficult place. Mars in the 12th house can be too quick with intimacy, but may not see one's aggressive nature. They may overcompensate with pushing freedom and end up being too controlling. Saturn, Mars afflictions to the 12th house, people get very controlling, and they don't even notice it because there's some deep fear in the 12th house, subconscious fear, especially if connected to Saturn, and they have to control everything in order to kind of like, keep away from their fear. Mercury in the 12th house may not see how stuck they are in their head and imprisoned by their own mind. So this is a real problem because, if we get too caught up in our head and we're blind in relationship, or we're just like overthinking everything, then we eventually don't live life and we're kind of stuck in our head. Jupiter in the 12th house, overindulgent, but not seeing their spendthrifty ways. Sometimes religious fundamentalism happens here. And again, people with Jupiter in the 12th house, if it's afflicted, they just don't even realize they're fundamental fanatics and stuff like that, and they're always pushing their spiritual path on everybody, and they don't even realize that what's going on. Venus in the 12th house, it's thought that Venus in the 12th house is the only decent planet that goes in the 12th house because Venus likes sexual activity. But I find, especially if Venus is afflicted, that people get overindulgent in finances, spending too much money, too much sexual activity, and they don't even realize it, and they become morally unconstrained by pleasure and unaware of the consequences of another conquest. Saturn in the 12th house, I have that blind to, I call it saveaholic martyrdom. I mean, 12th house is about service, and Saturn is about service also. And my Saturn is, I have an exalted Saturn. It's so strong that it kind of, I spent half my life doing service work, which is really great for the next life, but at some point you realize that you haven't taken care of this life very well because you've been so busy helping other people, and it's a problem. You become blind to the material world and the world of financial reality. Rahu in the 12th house, blind to unscrupulous or unethical behavior. I mean, Rahu is always a little bit on the edge. We like Rahu for its gangsters and its color, and but it creates shady characters. But Rahu in the 12th house, you don't even realize that you're like not ethical. You just think it's part of life, and you're caught up in the fantasy of ambition and disconnected from reality. Ketu in the 12th house, false holiness, but may have a secret side, and sometimes you get Ketu in the 12th house, you get people who are parasites living off of others but unaware that they're a burden. I've had this, when we were living in Sedona, we had an extra room, and we somehow attracted all these people with Ketu in the 12th house, and they were wonderful spiritual people, but they just kind of sucked us dry to kind of like not being aware that they needed to contribute to living in our house. Sometimes they get so caught up in meditation that they forget there is a real world. So all the planets in the 12th house are kind of blind. Now, there are other levels of blind things that we're going to talk about in the class. There are things called upagrahas, which are, and the ones that are most known are Bulaka and Mandi. And Bulaka and Mandi are called the Sons of Saturn. Wherever they go, they tend to create like extreme paranoia, and people who have serious mental problems may have key planets going there. I noticed this. I mean, when I watch Bulaka, I have Bulaka in Virgo, and I had Rahu, another planet of illusion, going over my natal Bulaka, and I was just fantasizing all these absurd conditions in my life, extreme fear. And it wasn't real. It was just, I finally understood what was going on. I had a friend who had Saturn going over her natal Gulika, and she was sure she was going to get tossed out of her house, and she's going to end up on the streets, and she was just caught up in this delusion, and that's what the Upagrahas can do sometimes when we get key transits to them, activating them. Other types of blind spots, can be types of mental confusion. Mercury and Moon are the two. We'll have a talk on those in a minute. Mercury and Moon are the two mental planets, and you don't want them connected because they don't really do well together. And sometimes when you get Moon Mercury afflictions in the natal chart, you get people who are very confused all the time. And particularly if afflictions to the fourth house, which is the mental house. We'll talk about that in a minute. The mind. That causes afflictions. And if you understand the planets you have in the fourth house or the transits going over the fourth house, you can get a grip on what's affecting your mind and how it is totally an illusion. And sometimes we get false optimism or pessimism kind of affecting us, and then we just don't have a sense of reality. So, most of you probably know that Jupiter is not, even though it's a natural benefic, it's a functional malefic for Libra rising and Taurus rising because it owns difficult houses. And so if you get those rising signs going into a Jupiter period, they can be falsely optimistic about things in their life, and if there are other placements that aren't working, they just make a lot of decisions that are not based on reality. So I had a friend who was in a Jupiter period who's a Taurus rising, and he kept thinking, oh, work was going to get wonderful, and he was going to make all this money, and it was just, he had a wonderful life. And Jupiter made him happy. It's a natural malefic. He felt happy, but it couldn't produce on a material level, and jobs never manifested, money never manifested. He was happy, which is nice, but his material life did not benefit. You have the opposite sometimes with Saturn periods for Taurus and Libra. Saturn's a natural malefic, but it's a functional benefic. So, because it owns in either the 9th or the 10th and the 4th and the 5th houses. So what happens is I had a friend, very talented woman. She went into her Saturn period, and and she got all depressed, and she got her mind was saying, no one's going to hire me, I'm worthless. That's the type of thing that Saturn does. It makes us depressed, it makes us not feel good about ourselves. And she said, I'm not even bothered, I'm not going to even look for a job. But she's standing in her house, somebody knocked on the door because she wouldn't pick up the phone, and offered her this really great job, which she took and became very successful at. But that's the type of thing that can happen. If we don't understand how the benefics and the malefics are functioning in our chart, they can create, these delusions and illusions and things like that. Addictions, very difficult problem. Probably we'll have a whole hour on addiction and Rahu, because Rahu tends to, especially in the second house, will create addictions connected to money, sex, food, or other cravings. We kind of think it's, if we have more of those things, that will somehow release our emotional anxiety, but it never does. And so we need a whole 2 or 3 lessons on Rahu and Ketu, because they create so much delusion in so many different ways. I mean, sometimes Rahu and Ketu can be wonderful, but for the most part, they weave Maya more than any of the other planets. One of the things that I want to explore, which is some new work that I want to do, which is, there are different sets of planets that are good for different rising signs. And all of you who know astrology learn these rules, but you don't always learn why something's an enemy or a friend of something. And we kind of need to understand that, because people kind of get blocked and get caught up in illusion because of this. For example, Mars is an action planet, so Aries rising and Scorpio rising just need to kind of do stuff. If they put Mercury in Scorpio, or Mercury and Mars connected, and they get into arguing and fighting and thinking too much, and then Mars moves out of its dharma. He's thinking too much. He needs to be acting. He can't be like Mercury. and so and Mercury can't be like Mars. I mean, you know, you can't, you put Mercury and Mars in Gemini or something like that. The person, you know, is just too aggressive and they can't even see it, and they get aggressive in fighting over and debating and stuff like that. So we have to kind of understand how the rising signs and the natural benefics and the malefics and the functional malefics and the friends and enemies really kind of function on an emotional, psychological level, because I think you can really help people if you understand their natures. For example, Aries is a celibate sign, and it's a warrior. He needs the strength to fight. He gets connected in Taurus or conjunct Venus. You know, he gets too caught up in passion, and it robs him of his creativity and his warrior nature, and it kind of pulls him down. And yes, that combination is charming and passionate, but it really takes him out of what he needs to do sometimes. So we have to kind of, and it can be a blind spot when we don't understand how these planets aspect. We're going to study Patanjali's Lajita Advastyas, which can also go deeper into personality. It's something I've never taught and I'm fascinated by. A lot of the stuff is very connected. So there are other types of kind of blind spots. If you read my recent article on the website, on my blog, Hidden Flaws in Personality, certain rising signs have innate problems, and sometimes we're kind of blind to them. I mean, the one that's actually really kind of telling is Gemini. Venus owns the 5th and the 12th houses, and everybody thinks, oh, Venus is the best planet for Gemini. You know, it's wrong, because Venus actually, if you meet all those people, and you look at Geminis, they're always kind of craving love and affection, often physically, and it's always kind of, it's never there, because Venus also owns the 12th, and so they're perpetually frustrated trying to find love, and it just never happens, and they perpetually have problems with women in relationships. You know, there are exceptions. You know, if you put Lord of the 5th and the 5th in Libra or something, you get a yoga or something. But for the most part, each of the rising signs has some kind of inherent flaw in it. You know, that it's kind of blind to. I mean, there's a wonderful story. You know, Bertie Maddox, I think, was Capricorn rising, and Capricorn has problems with Jupiter, and it's just kind of blind to kind of ethics in business, and it's the problem with, you know, our world today with ethics in business, because the Capricorn by nature is just kind of not connected to you know, the ethical nature of Jupiter, because Jupiter owns the 12th and the 3rd, and so Bernie Maddox, classical Capricorn rising in his Jupiter period, was just robbing people blind with his schemes until he got caught in the Saturn period. You know, it's really kind of fascinating when you understand these kind of innate blind spots that come up just by rising sign. I also read an article about Boudica, which I just published a couple of days ago, and you can read it. There's different houses that they're difficult houses for the movable, fixed, and dual signs, and I can't really go into this now, but basically there's this kind of innate problems that certain rising signs kind of bring to us, because, you know, the planets that own certain houses just create problems. And I mentioned Dr. Rashi at the beginning of the course, and it's kind of a fascinating topic. What happens with Dr. Rashi if you're born on the 4th Tithi or something? Let's say I'm born on the 8th Tithi, actually, I know that one. The 8th Tithi, Gemini and Virgo are kind of blocked out. So the planets in Gemini and Virgo have kind of blind spots, and the owner is also impacted. So and it can create kind of misperceptions about those kind of affairs, and so you have to really be kind of aware of that. It's kind of fascinating. Okay. Other types of blind spots, you know, Dasha Lords, you know, most of you know that you rotate the chart around the Dasha Lord, and you read the chart in that way. And the Dasha Lord basically takes over for the number of years that it's running. And if the Dasha Lord doesn't have dignity, or it's a functional malefic, or it's badly placed, you know, you may be blind to kind of the issues of what's going on there. I mean, Rahu and Ketu periods always create lots of kind of illusion by nature, but like I said, Jupiter periods for Libra and Taurus create problems. Saturn periods for Taurus and Libra create problems. Mars can also be kind of a functional a problem. Cancers and Leos, it's a good planet, produces good results in its period, but then, it still is going to bring up these kind of hidden Mars issues. I'll tell you a story about that in the course sometime. I have a kind of a Mars issue that's I didn't see for 40 years, and I just finally understood it a couple of years ago, and it's kind of it's about debt actually. Mars governs debt. I've got Mars in the success in Aries, and I was kind of blind about it, thinking that, oh, credit cards are wonderful, just borrow money and get all the things that you want. And that was really kind of a very naive blind spot, because Mars was my chart lord, Scorpio rising, and it was like I was blind to seeing myself, and I was thinking debt was good. Of course, debt's not good, but I just thought it was. I bought into the illusion of the bankers trying to push debt on people. It's very kind of funny how these things happen. I wanted to give you some material on the mind, and this is kind of part of our introduction to the course. So we have to spend a lot of time talking about the fourth and the fifth houses in the course, because the fourth house is the mind, the fifth house is judgment, and so planets influencing the fourth and the fifth house kind of influence our mind and our judgment, and they create problems. The fourth house is the basis of our happiness. I'm not going to really go into details here, but we don't want like Rahu or Saturn or Ketu in the fourth house, because they cause all kinds of problems and sorrow. The owner of the fourth house is going to be important, and even the moon sign for not the owner of the fourth house, but the moon sign. And its owner is going to be important. Like Scorpio rising endows people with deep secretive psychology, strong emotions, deep degrees of anger and frustration in their life, with profound psyches. And so even understanding, we'll spend a couple lessons talking about the moon and the moon signs and the planets connected to the moon, because they all have a very strong impact on our emotional nature. If we don't see the afflictions there, it creates a problem. Fifth house, Jupiter. You get malefics in the fifth house, Saturn, Rahu, Ketu. They kind of impair our judgment. We don't learn from our past mistakes. Mars also, and what happens is then we keep repeating the same mistakes. It's like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. If you keep repeating the same mistakes, you're going to suffer. You're going to get reborn, and you're going to keep repeating the same mistakes. So we have to kind of understand malefic influences on the fifth house and how we can repair our judgment. Mercury, Mercury is our intellect. We don't like Moon-Mercury connections or oppositions. We don't like Mercury in Cancer or Moon in Gemini, because it creates kind of confusion and mental judgment. Sometimes there are factors, put in the right houses with benefics or something that can get uplifted, but for the most part, we have to watch Moon-Mercury conjunctions, because it creates a lot of confusion. People can't figure out what to do. Third house. This is a talk I'm giving at Sedona in November. I'm kind of fascinated by the third house. The third house is usually subjugated to, brothers and communications or something like that, or the arts. It's a really superficial way of looking at the third house. The third house is really our primal mind. It's the 12th and the 4th, so it's the subconscious mind on some level, and it represents our core subconsciousness, kind of our drive toward sexual energy and aggression. The big thing about Matuna, which is the natural third house, means copulation. It's a natural sexual house, and so there's kind of, when it's not functioning well, we have these deep sexual drives in our life, these deep aggressive drives in our life. Put Venus in the third house, too strong a sex drive, out of control. Mars in the third house, because too violent. They say that Mars does well in the third house, but it's actually it doesn't actually. It's way too violent, too aggressive. They could be helped by dignity and things like that. But the third house is quite fascinating to study, because it's the primal mind, and afflictions to the third house kind of show us how our subconscious is running our life, and we're not seeing it. So we need to spend time on the third house. The seventh house I talked about in the introduction We're often blind to relationships. No planet does well here. Put Mercury in the 7th house and you attract partners who like affairs, and we're blind to them. We don't see it. 7th house is sunset. We don't see what's going on in the 7th house until we get hit, by something that happens and whatever. So 7th house creates blind spots. 8th house, is the most dreaded house because out of nowhere it brings pain, acute illness, accidents, and divorce, and you can see what's going on in the 8th house and when it's going to manifest. And there are subconscious problems in the 8th house that you can see and you can work on before they kind of bite you in the behind. So you have to kind of study the 8th house and what's going on there to really get a grip on your blind spots before they manifest into a problem. And there are wonderful things that can happen in the 8th house. It's a very mystical house. I've got Jupiter in the 8th house. It creates ability to very good Jyotish energy, but it can create a lot of good things. But no house is cut and dry. Obviously, there's always many realms. I have a whole class of secrets on the houses where I go into really, really great detail on each one of these houses because people don't ever seem to teach them or study them right. And 19 lessons on the houses. It's available. It's on sale until April 30th. Shameless plug here on my website, Secrets of the Houses. But really had fun with that class, and I really went into a lot of depth on these houses. So we have to say all the factors that disturb psychology. The moon is disturbed by the lords of the 6th, 8th, and the 12th. So anytime you get moon in the 6th, 8th, or the 12th, or conjunct or aspected by the 6th, 8th, and the 12th lord, it takes away happiness. It creates problems. Mars, Saturn, Rahu, Ketu. Mars, of course, anger. Saturn, depression. Rahu, psychic vulnerability. Ketu, psychic sensitivity. I have that problem, although I don't. Psychic sensitivity is that you just are way too sensitive to everybody. You go to a party and you feel everybody's pain, and it's a problem. I've got that problem because I've got such a strong Ketu. It just reaches into the etheric space, Akashic realm too much. Rahu, Saturn connected to the moon can create severe psychological health disturbances. Look at mental patients. You'll see a lot of Rahu, Saturn, moon connections. Mars, Saturn, moon can really destroy emotional happiness. This led me to spirituality. I have a strong Mars, Moon, Saturn connection, and the positive side of all these afflictions is it should turn you to God, and that's what all these planets are trying to do. They're trying to take us out of suffering, and they should point us to more spirituality. And when we move there, then a lot of these problems are released. First house too. We're often blind to our ego, and we always use the word that person has a big ego. Sometimes we're blind to seeing our ego, and it can be afflictions to the first house. Saturn afflicting the first house may make people selfish. Mars afflicting the first house may make a person aggressive, depending on the signs involved. Rahu afflicting the first house makes one unstable. So sometimes if first house planets we can understand because we're not really blind to them. They're very intimate in our lives, but we still have to know how to kind of deal with them and change those patterns. When I was putting together this lesson, my wife sometimes tells me I'm selfish, and I do have Mars afflicting my moon in the first house, and Saturn kind of hemming it in there, and I can be selfish, and I'm not always willing to look at it. It's kind of a blind spot. It affects marriage. It's Kuja Dosha, and Mars and Virgo in my Navamsha chart. And you have to kind of be aware of these blind spots, otherwise you're going to get into trouble. Rising signs and emotional afflictions. Pisces and Virgo are emotionally sensitive and can create psychological imbalances. So the Virgo-Pisces axis is very important in looking at mental and physical health because it's so, Virgo's the natural 6th house, Pisces the natural 12th house. That axis is so key for kind of the subconscious health axis for kind of understanding how those interact. Planets in the 6th, 8th, and 12th house often create emotional upset, suffering, and unhappiness. Ascendant Lord, Moon, Sun, or Jupiter here this leads to, what happens, there's a good side to everything. What happens is you have a problem, you have a lot of planets in the 6th, 8th, and the 12th house, you suffer, and so you look for meditation, you look for a spiritual teacher, you look for religion, you look for something to relieve the emotional pain. And most people, on the spiritual path find it. Some people don't, and they continue to suffer. How do we time psychological problems? Well, you look at the dashas. So obviously, the moon dasha, moon governs the mind, is particularly difficult for having a lot of emotional problems, particularly moon Mars, moon Rahu, moon Saturn, moon Ketu, moon Mercury. I went through my moon period. I don't know if I was aware. I was pretty young when I went through it. My moon period was a pretty difficult period for me. All those sub-periods were pretty challenging because the moon is, you're constantly dealing with those kind of complex energies. Moon Rahu will create confusion, things like that. Mercury periods, you get certain combinations that can be difficult. Mercury Rahu, Mercury Moon. Rahu periods by nature cause psychological problems. You can have an exalted Rahu in a really good place, and it's still Rahu, but you can't have good Rahu periods. But Rahu Moon, Rahu Mars, Rahu Saturn, Rahu Mercury, all difficult combinations to go through. I'm currently in Rahu Mercury myself, not without its problems on the mental level. Thank God I have meditation. Saturn periods often cause stress. People are always coming to me for readings when they're in a Saturn period because really kind of Saturn is kind of an ending. I'm a master of Saturn. I've been writing at this book, but Saturn, Moon, Saturn, Rahu, Saturn, Mercury, particularly difficult. So you can see, take the mental planets, Moon, Mercury, get them into combinations with the malefics, and you're going to get periods that are problematic. Periods of the 4th house create emotional disturbances. So, if you've got planets in the 4th house or the 4th house lord, and a lot of afflictions there, the whole period's going to seem like emotionally disturbed and should be pointing you toward moksha. A lot of combinations here. I just wanted to give you some kind of general ideas. Transits. Transits is my specialty. My book is on transits, and I've really looked at transits closely 30 years. And what I do with transits is I see how the transit is affecting my life, affecting people's lives around me. I've just learned so much from observation. I kind of encourage you all to kind of study your transits because you see how they kind of interact with the mind and how they create Maya, sometimes temporary. The moon transits in a new nakshatra every day, so it changes. Sun spends 30 days in a sign, Saturn spends 2.5 years in a sign. But if you study these influences, you become aware of how you're being impacted. So study your long transits. We get malefics spending a long time in the 1st, 4th, or 5th houses. It affects self-esteem in the 1st house, affects our heart and emotions in the 4th house, it affects our discrimination in the 5th house. So study your Saturn transits. The first, everybody knows about Sati, Saturn in the 1st house affecting self-esteem and self-confidence. Saturn in the 4th house is sometimes worse because it's your heart, it's your emotions, it's your mind. I think it really has a deeper impact. So that's one of the Saturn transits that you have to watch. Saturn, transits to the 5th house, again, can we make good decisions? And when you've got Rahu doing a 1.5 year transit through your 5th house, you have to be careful. You have to be aware of it so you're not blinded to make bad decisions. So look at that. I actually made it through this talk on time. I wanted to get you out early. I've got an appointment to go to in about 2:15. I do have time for some questions. I do have a shameless plug here. So if you're interested in my class, there is a discount. It's 13 lessons. It starts June 17th. Go to meeting. It's going to be in the afternoon, 2:30 to 4:30 Central Time. If you miss a class, it's taped, and the tape's it's automatically sent to you. It's $295. It comes out to be, about $25 a It's actually very cheap. Actually, it's even about $25 a class. And my classes have been very inexpensive. I put 6 or 7 hours into preparing them, and actually, the 49 after May 1st. Jamie, do you want to say anything? I know you've been studying with me for about a year. Do you want to say anything about my classes? It's hard for me to plug myself. I mean, I just love teaching. I have to teach on Jupiter. I've got Jupiter in the 8th and Gemini with stationary Jupiter, and I just have to teach. It's my life purpose, and that's, I put my heart into all these courses. And my goal is always to make these difficult concepts clear, and that's my gift. I've studied with all these teachers, and you can spend hours trying to figure out what they say because they're Indian, and so I try to speak English and translate English into Sanskrit into English so you understand in simple English what is going on. So that's my gift. Jamie, you want to say anything? Any questions from the audience? Anything you want to say about your experience in my classes with people?
Sure. I'd be happy to. First of all, no questions, so I don't see anything coming in. But as Barry said, I've been studying with Barry for, gosh, probably over a year. And what really drew me was the depth of the material. And it's a lot different than what is seen in mainstream. I mean, Barry really dives in deep and goes into a lot of esoteric things that are not generally taught or really even thought about, in mainstream astrology. So that's what really draws me to the material. And he provides more value than what's just on the surface level of the classes. So there's so much that he gives, so much material, just in the slide presentations, and then what we get by email too in the articles that he sends. And he's approachable, and if you have questions, there's also chart examples that really help me to learn and understand the material, because Jyotish is so deep anyway, and there's so many different levels and strands, and you could just easily go down so many rabbit holes, or at least I do. So I found everything in his courses just, really helpful in just understanding all of the many puzzle pieces and just trying to put the information together. So going just from one class, to another and another, I've been able to just assimilate, the information and the resources. I mean, Barry's just a wealth of knowledge, and I can go to him and ask a question and say, hey, Barry, do you have a, recommendation on this or a book on that? Or, people will pop in during the class itself and have just even a little discussion, and, you just get excited about the material. I mean, you could spend, weeks, on one small topic or question. And so, yeah, I've just been sticking around because, this stuff just, it's fascinating. And then when you get more deep into it with remedies, and you start talking about the mythology and the history, and I don't know. I could go on and on. I just get really excited about it because it's really fascinating. And once you start applying it and you start looking at it in your own chart, and then you start thinking about it in your life, I'm amazed and wowed all the time. I have so many ahas. I'll be sitting in my car or having coffee at Starbucks, and I start seeing this stuff in action, and my mind is blown. I'll mention something to Barry or just in the class, and I'm like, I'm seeing this stuff live. So it really does work, and my mind's just constant. I'm just constantly wowed and humbled, as a student. And that's one thing about Jyotish. You're constantly learning, constantly growing. And that's what Barry brings to the table. He really, he looks outside of the box. You're going deeper, you're expanding your mind, and it's just a really beautiful thing. That's what I like. You're not stuck in just, we're just going to look at the 12 zodiac signs that we're all familiar with. But there's also a blending too, which is really beautiful, between East and West. But then he goes in a lot a lot more into the spiritual aspects of things, which I really appreciated, because I really felt that there was stuff missing, and Barry brings that and blends it really well with his classes. So that's why I'm here, and been around, you know, for more than a year, and I continue to go along and learn and grow. And I can't say more. I mean, I could say more about Barry's classes, and his formats work really well with the slide shares and the PDF presentations that he sends afterwards. But seriously, the value too that he provides, I mean, he just keeps giving and giving and giving too. It was way more than I expected, even just for the money. So Barry, just know that I appreciate you and everything that you do. I know you spend hours and hours on your courses, and there's a lot of work, a lot of, you know, stuff in the background that goes into this, and just very much appreciated.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, that was wonderful. But anyway, yeah, I just have to do this. It's absolutely my life's purpose. For those of you, I have put in other courses together. You go to my website on the webinar tab. There's a course that is kind of a good prerequisite for this class, if you, which is called the Emotional, Psychological, and Spiritual Basis of Vedic Astrology, the Schools of Karma. Did it last spring. It's about 8 or 9 lessons, and it really tries to go really deeply into. I don't think we spend enough time. I mean, a lot of people are interested in astrology for prediction, and to me, prediction is. It's useful, but I mean, first of all, no one wants to hear bad predictions, and you know, yes, you want to give people good predictions, but to me, it's more useful to kind of help people see their blind spots. And so I put together a whole first course, actually, the Emotional, Psychological, and Spiritual Basis of Vedic Astrology, which is available on videotape. I specialize in financial astrology. I did a class on money karma and personal finance last September, which is available. My Secrets of the Houses course is actually 19 lessons. I really, I'm going to turn that into a book eventually this year. And I did a relationship class also. So I'm currently teaching a nakshatra class. So, you know, if you're not interested in this class, you can certainly explore some of my other classes. And I'm passionate about my classes. I mean, I actually earn my living from, you know, doing financial planning and financial consulting. It's really my business, but my passion has moved away from finance into teaching and teaching astrology. And so, you know, it's not, I know some people charge $1,000 for, you know, 10 lessons. You know, so I mean, like, I think my classes are really inexpensive, and my wife doesn't see me because I spend so much time on them. So hopefully you'll join me. So I'm going to close here. And if you have any questions, you can email me at my contact information. And sometimes people need payment programs. If you know, a $300 course is too much, I do allow people to do payment programs if they need that. I realize everybody's on a budget, and you know, again, happy to work with you. I obviously do readings too. I don't even have time to do readings. I've got too many up my sleeve, but I love teaching. So this is why you get me here today. So have any final questions, thoughts, Jamie? So new book coming out this week, hopefully, and old book is available on Amazon already and on my website. And sorry for the shameless plugs, but obviously all this stuff takes incredible time. I think we put 600 hours into our Vedic transit book, you know, and it really was service. It wasn't, certainly not making a lot of money from it after 600 hours of work. Jamie did 200 hours of editing, and I spent 400 hours writing. But, you know, you just have to do this stuff, you know, it's my passion. So do enjoy it. It's there for you. So we'll see you hopefully soon. Those of you in my nakshatra class, we'll see you tomorrow, and have a great Saturday, everybody.